Imagine waking up to the news that the Supreme Court of the United States just handed down a 9-0 unanimous decision, a ruling so powerful, so shocking, that it's now being described as the case that forever changes how the Constitution is interpreted. This isn't speculation. This isn't media spin. This is the Supreme Court stepping in and sending shockwaves through the White House, Congress, and every corner of America. Today, we're breaking down exactly what happened, what this means for your constitutional rights, and why this decision may reshape the balance of power between government and the people for decades to come. But before we jump in, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. YouTube loves to quietly unsubscribe people, especially on channels that talk about freedom, the Constitution, and accountability. So double-check that red button and make sure notifications are on. That helps the channel fight back against the algorithm. All right, let's get into it. So, what exactly happened? The Supreme Court just issued a unanimous 9-0 decision in a case that began as what seemed like a routine constitutional challenge, but turned into one of the most consequential rulings in modern history. The case centered around a question that has long divided the courts. Does the federal government have the power to bypass core constitutional protections in the name of national interest? For years, lower courts had sided with the government, allowing certain agencies and executive departments to stretch constitutional limits under the vague justification of emergency powers. But this time, the Supreme Court said a no, and not just by a slim margin. All 9 justices, conservative and liberal alike, stood together and said the same thing. The Constitution means what it says. The Bill of Rights cannot be rewritten by executive order. That's the core of this case, a historic moment of clarity from the highest court in the land. Now, this case, which legal experts are already calling a constitutional earthquake, started when a private citizen challenged the federal government for overreach under emergency authority. The petitioner argued that the agency had used those powers to enforce actions that directly violated multiple amendments, including the First, Fourth, and 10th Amendments. Specifically, the government had argued that certain constitutional protections could be temporarily suspended under crisis conditions. That argument didn't sit well with the court. During oral arguments, even some of the justices who typically defer to government authority pressed back hard. Justice Gorsuch asked point blank, "At what point does an emergency end and the Constitution begin again?" Justice Kagan followed up, "We cannot create a Constitution that bends only when convenient." And Justice Thomas, in his characteristically sharp tone, stated, "Rights guaranteed by the Constitution are not government privileges. They are limits on government power." That's when everyone watching knew this wasn't going to be a split decision. When the decision dropped, it hit like a thunderclap. 9-0 unanimous, not a single dissent. The court ruled that the federal government had no constitutional authority to suspend rights or reinterpret amendments under emergency declarations unless Congress explicitly grants that power, and it passes strict constitutional scrutiny. The opinion written by Chief Justice Roberts declared, "The Constitution was not written for calm seas. It was written for storms." That one sentence is already being quoted in law schools, newsrooms, and on the floor of Congress. The decision reaffirmed something America has been drifting away from. The Constitution is not conditional. Government cannot pick and choose which parts of it to honor. And no emergency, not war, not pandemic, not policy can erase the rights of the people. And make no mistake, the fallout from this ruling is massive. Almost immediately after the decision was announced, legal teams across the country began filing new challenges against long-standing executive powers and agency authorities. We're already seeing lawsuits against the Department of Justice over certain surveillance programs, the ATF's enforcement of rule-based restrictions, and federal health agencies over mandates that may have violated constitutional protections. Political analysts are calling this the biggest check on executive power since the Nixon era. Even the mainstream media, which usually celebrates federal expansion, has been forced to admit this ruling is a game chore. You can almost hear the panic in D.C. halls. The bureaucracy has grown comfortable operating in the gray areas, places where the law wasn't crystal clear. Now, the Supreme Court just drew a bright line across the Constitution and said, "Step over this line, and you'll answer to us to now." Let's break down what this really means beyond the headlines. This wasn't just a case about one agency, one power, or one citizen. This was about the very structure of our republic, and the court just sent a reminder that we are a nation of laws, not of men. The ruling puts every branch of government on notice. The executive branch cannot bypass the Constitution by claiming necessity. The legislative branch cannot delegate unconstitutional powers to agencies, and the judicial branch has the duty to strike down any law or order that violates the Bill of Rights, no matter who signed it. Justice Allo, in his concurrence, put it perfectly. A crisis may demand action, but action that violates the Constitution is not a solution. It's a surrender. That's the tone of this ruling. Defiant, clear, and historic. Across the country, Americans are reacting. On one side, constitutional scholars and freedom advocates are celebrating, calling it a return to original intent and a victory for every citizen who believes government should serve, not rule. On the other side, federal agencies and bureaucratic defenders are in panic mode, warning that the ruling will limit flexibility in future emergencies. But let's be honest, that's exactly the point. Freedom isn't supposed to be convenient for government. It's supposed to be inconvenient for tyranny. And that's what this 9-0 decision restores. Accountability, transparency, and constitutional boundaries. Now, some of you might be asking why now? Why would even the liberal justices side with the conservatives here? Because at the heart of it, this case wasn't political. It was fundamental. If one administration can twist the Constitution to fit its agenda, then so can the next one. And that's a danger to every citizen, no matter your party, your beliefs, or your background. This unanimous ruling shows that, at least for now, the Supreme Court understands that protecting the structure of the Constitution transcends politics, and it's a reminder that rights only matter when they're tested. Let's talk about what happens next, because this isn't just symbolic. In the wake of this ruling, we're already seeing federal judges citing the case in new constitutional challenges, states invoking the decision to push back on federal mandates, citizens filing civil suits where agencies may have crossed the line. This decision could also redefine federalism, shifting power back toward the states and individual citizens. It might even become the precedent that limits the so-called administrative state, forcing agencies like the EPA, ATF, and DOJ to justify every rule they enforce under the actual text of the Constitution, and that's where the rail revolution begins. Because when you strip away the bureaucracy and bring government back under the Constitution, that's when freedom expands. Historians are already drawing comparisons to landmark cases like Marbury versus Madison, Brown versus Board of Education, and District of Columbia versus Hilaire. This 920 decision joins that list not because of its policy outcome, but because it reasserts a truth that many in power have forgotten. The Constitution does not belong to politicians. It belongs to the people. That's the quote Justice Barrett used in her concurring opinion, and it might just define this generation's constitutional moment. In 20, 50, or even 100 years, this case will be remembered as the point when the Supreme Court reminded America of something simple but profound. Our freedoms aren't granted by government. They're guaranteed against it. So, what's the takeaway here? When the Supreme Court speaks with one voice, and that voice says the Constitution cannot be rewritten by executive action, the message is clear. Freedom still has defenders. The people still have power, and the Constitution still stands strong. This decision won't fix every issue in Washington overnight, but it plants a flag right in the middle of the battlefield saying the rule of law still matters. As this case ripples across the courts, Congress, and the states, we're going to see a lot of pushback, but for now, freedom just won a major round. So keep paying attention, keep learning, and most importantly, never forget that every right you have was written in ink, not pencil, because once freedom is erased, it doesn't come back easily. If you found this breakdown helpful and want to support the channel, the best way to do that is simple. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, letting me know your thoughts on this historic decision. You can also check out one of the two videos on the screen right now. Both dive deeper into major constitutional rulings that are reshaping America's legal future. As always, Thank you for watching, for supporting this community, and for standing up for truth and freedom. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and it will be maintained by armed scholars.